Greg owns both.
owns both.
Greg owns that whole where the house is.
Yeah,
So 40 acres over there. I think you guys have 20, or is it technically 19.5, 19, whatever. I call it.
it's so long ago. As soon as the project's over, I forget.
Yeah.
I empty my files of all the details.
I do that a lot too. So basically, that yeah, the back 20. It's not even the whole back 20. I don't think it's 20.
Everything on the below whatever the border is.
I know where the border is, but I don't know that it's 20 acres and 20 acres. But anyway, somewhere in the field, I know we have these T-posts on one end of the field and the other end of the field. And if you stand over and look at the other, that's the Mass line. And you guys have everything that's in Massachusetts. So, yeah. So that but basically, but Greg owns that whole piece on that side of the street. I own a piece of the house.
Things for the farm.
Oh, it's always stressful this time of year.
Is it awful with the gas prices?
Well, there's a lot of complications due to the economy that's going on right now. Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, I think just recently we've had more and more people feel like more incongruence with like what we've been feeling, but a lot of people have been trying to tell me that everything's been great, but and by people I don't mean farmers. But yeah, this has been going on for about a year, and it's just getting worse for us that way. But the funny part about the economy in general, and I hope it holds true, because we are an expensive place to shop at, comparatively speaking, but it seems like when things get rougher, people come and get a little bit of, I don't know, we find that like we do better in rougher times
Oh, interesting.
than good times.
Huh. Did you find that?
Well, our farm stand is new, so it's harder
Yeah.
to say. But I will say that COVID was such a boost for us.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
COVID was a boost for, all local foods, we did, everybody did.
I would say that. I mean, yeah, I think in times when people feel like things are not going well, they like want to be connected to things that they feel like are important, maybe, and like they worry about the centralization of food systems, perhaps. I don't know. Like, it's a good
Yeah.
food for thought, right?
But the fuel for us changes everything, and everybody thinks that it doesn't because we use organic fertilizer or something. But the problem is it's the cost of nitrogen,
Yeah.
and so people don't understand economics. Like if it's cheaper to buy nitrogen from chicken manure, then the price of chicken manure goes up because the demand for it goes up, and so like we're paying more per ton. And then also, the potash is insane because all the potash comes out of Canada. And
Jeez, so tariffs.
it's not only the tariffs, but now the trucking is double.
Oh,
Yeah, the trucking that is significant with anything that's getting like
Yeah,
shipped.
trucking
Freight.
is double. Is double with anything you want to do. And so then, in order to kind of finance my, like I had to rebuy out my farm from my ex-wife. I sell agricultural equipment, and so that price has, like, I bring in stuff from mostly European because the key is that like we have all these little tiny farms, and we don't use these big, huge pieces of equipment that people use, and so we do that. We have the little stuff.
Interesting. And so you have to get that more easily sourced from Europe.
Yeah, European farms are much more, they're smaller and decentralized.
Yeah.
They don't have what we have here.
Yeah.
and so their equipment is made different.
Wow.
And so then I bring in that equipment and I sell it to other small growers,
Yeah.
which is great, until it's like $2,000 more, $3,000 more, like every, like,
Equipment just because of
because there's not only the general tariff now, there is a steel and aluminum tariff. So like a $10,000 piece of equipment is almost $2,000 more. It's 12. So that hurts my business. It hurts other farmers' ability to get access to that equipment. Oh, there's my rabbi.
There's Alex. Oh.
So do you do used equipment?
I don't think he recognized me.
Yeah, we do. I
I
will
took his
sell
follow
other
making
people's.
class.
Oh, you did? I love that. When Max told me that, I was like, that is so perfect for
It was
him.
awesome.
He makes
Take
such
pictures of
good
it.
holiday.
Yeah.
It was like holy flour, and it's so good.
Oh, he didn't teach
Those
us
are
that.
harder to.
He asked
those are
for
harder.
it.
All right.
I've had it before, and it's like incredible. It's
When
like
it comes
so
time
light
for
and
you to be
fluffy, but
pointing at the
you're like so healthy for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yum.
you'll probably
I
want to
know.
hand
I know Max always like, I gotta go home, and
and
Alex made me
point
dinner.
Good afternoon. Welcome to First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist here in Newburyport. We're very glad that you're here. I'm Annie Madden, current chair of our green team here, the environmental group at this church. We are pleased to sponsor this gathering to learn about local farms and local farming. We are fortunate here in this part of New England to benefit from so many local farms that provide healthy, nourishing, fresh produce and other products for our families and tables. The farming practices being used these days begin with healthy soils built up with ecologically based farming techniques. This is very different from large conventional farms where the produce must travel long distances to get here. You will learn much more about these practices and benefits shortly. Let me introduce our presenters. Vanessa Johnson-Hall is Director of Land Conservation for Essex County Greenbelt, your local land trust. Sure, I'll speak closer, is that better? Okay, thank you. Vanessa Johnson-Hall is Director of Land Conservation at Essex County Greenbelt, your local land trust. Greenbelt has focused on conservation of farming lands along with other important lands for many years, and Vanessa has been deeply involved in this work for a very long time. She shares about the challenge of keeping farmers on the land given development pressures and costs, and some of the strategies and successes that Greenbelt is so familiar with. Then we are fortunate to have two active farmers here with us today who are currently in the midst of very busy farming seasons to share their farm stories, their journey to dedicating themselves to local farming, along with challenges and promise of the farming life. First up will be Stacey Apple of Iron Ox Farm in Hamilton, and then Andre Cantelmo from Heron Pond Farm in Southampton, New Hampshire. Following the presentation, we'll have time for questions and conversation with all of you. Doug Latham of our green team is going to be our moderator this afternoon. In addition to many other interests, Doug too is a farmer, farming hay in Groveland and neighboring communities. At the end of the conversation, please join us for refreshments downstairs in the lower meeting hall, where you will have time to meet the farmers and participants here. Rosemary from Nourishing the North Shore will also be attending to represent this organization, which has been working since 2015 to connect community to local fresh produce and farms, providing equal access to all members of the North Shore communities. On that note, let's get a sense of our audience today. Please raise your hand if you're a local farmer who markets their products to the public. Excellent. We're so glad that you're here. Next up, if you're a home gardener, primarily to benefit your family, please raise your hands. Lastly, would all of you on the green team and FRS staff please raise your hands so we can recognize and thank you all for your work preparing for this gathering. Thank you, Nick. Lastly, on the basic logistics, there are restrooms downstairs in the lower meeting hall beneath this room, down the stairs, or via the lift in the vestibule. Please silence your devices and let's get rolling. Doug? Okay, well, Vanessa, let's just go. Okay. Yep.
Sure, I'm just going to move this off to the side because none of you will be able to see me behind the podium. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see, is this now working? Hello? All right. Thanks so much for inviting me here this afternoon. I'm honored to be here. How many people in the audience know who Greenbelt is? Ooh, that's a lot. All right, but were there a few people who didn't raise their hands? Because that's a very tiny part of my presentation. I'm going to do it anyway because it's a good part of my presentation. So I'll give you a brief overview of who Greenbelt is, but I'm primarily going to focus on our farmland conservation program and specifically how it's evolved over time to meet the increasing needs of Essex County's farmers, especially the new generation who want to farm here. So Greenbelt is Essex County's land trust. We're a member-supported, not-for-profit land conservation organization. We're one of about 1,200 independent land conservation organizations called land trusts across the country. Greenbelt, however, is the only land trust focusing exclusively on preserving Essex County's natural lands and working farms. To date, we've preserved just under 23,000 acres. About 5,000 of those acres include working farms, many of which you might recognize the names of up here if you can read that slide. Sorry, it's so small. Why do we care about our local farms? Well, for the obvious reasons, they produce delicious, healthy food. But protecting farms does so much more than just growing food. Protecting our local farms is part of protecting our planet and our quality of life. It's part of having equitable access to healthy food and part of our local economic resilience. And New England farms are unique because they're a patchwork of crops and wild landscapes. They're not thousands of acres of monocultures. These wild landscapes include native woodlands that provide important habitat for resident and migratory songbirds and other natural native wildlife. These trees purify our drinking water, clean our air, keep our air cooler, sequester carbon, and soak up rains from increasingly heavy rainstorms that we're getting with climate change, although we haven't gotten enough yet this spring. These patchwork of landscapes often harbor wetlands that contribute to our drinking water supply and also retain floodwaters to keep areas downstream from flooding. In an area of climate change and pandemics, it's increasingly important to have a reliable local food source. Local farms are local food security. Farms are also an important part of strong local economies and a source of jobs. These are the reasons Greenbelt is working so hard to save Essex County's farms. So we've been protecting farmland since we were founded in 1961, but the threats to farmland have increased exponentially since then, and it's not a cliche to say that we are in a race against time to save our remaining farms. The pace of farmland loss is increasing. Massachusetts lost the same amount of farmland in 5 years, the 5 years between 2017 and 2022, that was lost in the previous 15 years. Without increasing the pace of conservation, Massachusetts is projected to lose an additional 90,000 acres of farmland by 2040. That's less than 15 years away. Greenbelt estimates that just under 2/3 of the farmland in Essex County remains unprotected. Over the next few slides, I'll describe how Greenbelt has evolved our farmland protection program to include tools that are uniquely available to land trusts that allow us to meet the growing challenges facing farmers to securing land to farm in our region. So first, why is land so vulnerable to development? Farmland so vulnerable to development? Any ideas? You can shout it out, popcorn. People want houses. It's already cleared. It's cleared, it's mostly flat, excellent soils. I mean, it's a developer's dream. Who wouldn't want to build on that? It's easy. But also, one of the most pressing reasons is exponentially rising land values. Averaging $14,300 an acre, I was shocked to learn that Massachusetts has the second highest cost of farmland in the nation, second only to California. And there's a lot of pressure on families to cash in on that value. So it comes as no surprise then that land access is the #1 challenge facing young and beginning farmers in our region. As of course is the high price of housing. How many of you have children or friends and family who can't afford to buy houses in this region? Exactly, me too. Also, the farmers that own this land are aging. Yeah, well, so are the people protecting the land, by the way. But we have successors. Farmers are aging. Over 2/3 of farmers across the nation are over 65, and that's true for Essex County too. And the majority of those farmers don't have a successor to take over the farm operation. That leaves that land extremely vulnerable. Development pressure is intense. Landowners are being solicited all the time by developers. These are actual postcards and a letter that a landowner we worked with in Merrimack received all the time for his 120-acre farm. I'll just read some of it because it's a little bit small. Fair cash offer with no holding fees. Fast or flexible closing. No repairs needed, sell as is. No stress. No realtor commissions or closing costs. We cover everything. Annie and Holly, I'm going to steal that language for Greenbelt's postcards that we're going to start sending to landowners because we do the same thing except we won't develop your land. So for a minute, I'm going to take you on a brief imagination exercise. Imagine that you've just inherited the family farm in, say, West Newbury from your recently deceased parents. You live in California, or New Jersey, or even New York, or even a different part of Massachusetts, and have a life there that's no longer tied to West Newbury. You have student loans, your own mortgage, and kids you need to send to college someday. You have 3 siblings who also inherited this farm and now co-own it with you, 2 of whom recently lost their jobs. What are your options? Is preserving the land your first choice? It might not be when you're getting letters like this, and you haven't gotten Greenbelts or you threw it away, that are telling you can get tens of thousands or even millions of dollars for your land, and you can get it really easily from a developer. Spoiler alert, it's not easy, it's not quick, especially when you're working with builders. Now imagine that you're a young farmer who grew up in the area, but you didn't inherit any land. Maybe you went to Essex Aggie and studied farming there. You went to UMass and got a degree in sustainable agriculture. And you came back to the North Shore because this is home. This is where your family is. This is where you want to farm. You've had a handshake agreement with your now deceased parents, the farmland owner, to farm the land for 6 years. You've worked hard to create a thriving organic vegetable farm and a really popular CSA. And all of this could be taken away from you in a heartbeat because the heirs have decided to sell the farm for development. How do you justify investing in a farm business without land security? How do you afford to buy land to farm? How do you afford to buy a home to live in on or near the farm? These are the challenges where Greenbelt is trying to address in our farmland conservation program. So as I mentioned, since 1961, we've preserved farmland, and we've done a decent job of that. We've done that primarily two ways: by owning land through donations or through purchasing that land. But primarily we've done that through something called conservation restrictions or agricultural preservation restrictions. These are, oops, sorry, lost my place in my notes. So conservation or agricultural preservation restrictions, they extinguish development rights on land through voluntary agreements with landowners that allows the landowners to continue owning the land and farming it, and they can even sell that land. That conservation restriction or agricultural preservation restriction stays with the land forever, ensuring it's never developed and can always be used for farming. But what we found is that these conservation restrictions or agricultural preservation restrictions alone are not enough to suppress the value of farmland enough for it to be affordable. To really affect the future of farming, we needed to evolve our land protection program work to include mechanisms that ensure land and housing affordability for farmers who want to farm here. So the tools available to us aren't new. They've been used by our state agricultural preservation restriction program for over a decade. That's actually the first ag preservation program in the country. They've also been used by statewide land trusts like Maine Farm Land Trust or Vermont Land Trust, if you've heard of those. They've been amazing mentors to Greenbelt in evolving our farm conservation program. So we think of this as whole farm conservation because we're not just protecting the land, we're protecting the farmer's ability to live on the land. Because if the farmer can't live here, they can't farm here. And if there are no farmers, we don't have any farms. So how can we preserve housing and land affordability along with preserving the land itself? Well, to start, purchasing those agricultural preservation restrictions or conservation restriction begins to do that by extinguishing development rights on that land. But as I mentioned, that alone wasn't enough to suppress the value of that land to affordable levels. So we can further suppress that price by including resale restrictions that require that the land and the house be sold at agricultural value. And I should have mentioned we can also include the house in the agricultural preservation restriction, which the state can't do. We can require in those restrictions that the land can only be sold from one farmer to another qualified farmer. We can also require that the land remain in farming. It can't be allowed to go entirely to go fallow. And we can retain a purchase right in the land such that if the farmer can't find another farmer to buy the farm, Greenbelt can exercise our option, step in, buy the farm, and hold it until we can find another farmer to buy, live on, and operate that farm. To date, Greenbelt's completed 2 projects that move us more in this direction of affordability. Projects that represent a major turning point in Greenbelt's farmland conservation program to whole farm conservation. The first might look familiar to you. It's right down the road, Grant Family Farm at Brown Spring. This is a project that Greenbelt completed with the town of West Newbury in 2019. Greenbelt worked with the town to fundraise the funds from Community Preservation Act to acquire a private agricultural preservation restriction, so that's a preservation restriction held by Greenbelt, not held by the state, on 10 acres that extinguished the right to further develop that land. So that agricultural preservation restriction eliminated 3 home sites on the land that could have been developed. That agricultural preservation restriction includes resale restrictions that require that the land, the house on it, and any other farm buildings be sold no greater than agricultural value to a new farmer. That ag preservation restriction requires that the land stay in farming. This and a huge amount of hard work on behalf of the farmer buyer, Chris Grant, allowed Chris to be able to afford this farm. If Chris and Alice ever decide to sell, that agricultural preservation restriction gives Greenbelt the option to purchase the land in case they can't find a new farmer to buy the land. And then we can hold it until we find a new farmer. And then once we find that farmer, Greenbelt is required to sell the land and everything on it at agricultural value to a new farmer. We can't sell it at market value as if it was unrestricted. We can't sell it as if it were being purchased as an equestrian estate. And we can't sell it to a non-farmer. The next one you'll hear more about from Stacey, who's here. She'll give you the reality check on what I say. So Greenbelt's acquisition of Green Meadows Farm in Hamilton and Topsfield gave us the opportunity to implement what's called a ground lease, which is a tool that's adapted from the affordable housing movement, for any of you who are involved in that. In this case, Greenbelt owns the land, but that land is leased to Alex and Stacey with a 99-year inheritable ground lease. So they have a 99-year inheritable ground lease to use this land. With the ground lease, the farmers lease the land, but they own everything outright on top of the land, not just the crops and their business, but any structure they build on top of the land they own. By eliminating the need for new farmers to buy land, we've allowed them to have secure, long-term access to farmland, and hopefully to build equity in the farm by owning everything on top of the land: their future home, barn, their new farm stand, and any other agricultural infrastructure. Similar to an agricultural preservation restriction, there are resale restrictions in the lease agreement that allow them to sell these structures, but they have to sell them to another qualified farmer, and they have to sell them at agricultural value. So they can't just sell them to anyone. Just two more examples, and then I'll pass it on to the interesting people here. So Silverbrook Farm, I'm really proud of this because it literally took me 15 years, my entire career at Greenbelt, and 2 landowners to protect this farm. So we finished purchasing this farm last year, and the farmers, this is a farm that had been in the family for several generations, and in fact they'd been leasing the land to a family for 2 generations of that family, Wally and Stephanie Laziska, who own Wally's Vegetables, if any of you are familiar with them. They sell at the Haverhill Farmers Market. So Wally and Steph are probably in their late 60s, and we hope they'll be farming forever, but they might not be. But as long as they're farming, they're allowed to use, they can stay here and lease this land at the same rate they were leasing it from the owners from whom we bought the farm. Their son seems to be interested in farming, and we hope he'll take over. But if he doesn't, what's really exciting to me is that we own this land. And so we have the flexibility and the opportunity with all the new farmers that are in this region looking to farm land to ensure that this farm will always remain available to farmers in an affordable and in a secure way. And then hot off the press, we are literally, as we speak, in the process of, well, I guess I'm not literally signing, but the organization is in the process of signing a purchase and sale agreement to acquire a 34-acre farm in Boxford and North Andover. This is a farm, this is about 1/3 of the remaining unprotected farmland of Barker Farm, which has been in the same family for multiple generations, since about the 1600s, so 400 years, which is extraordinary. Those landowners had been in conversations with a major corporation that develops assisted living facilities for over a year. In their heart of hearts, they want to see the land preserved, so they agreed to give Greenbelt an opportunity to buy it. To buy it, we had to compete with that landowner. So the purchase price for this land is $3 million for 34 acres. It's not cheap. We are going to 2 town meetings in one night. Ask me how I'm going to do that. I don't know yet. On May 12th, we're seeking $1.5 million in Community Preservation Act funds to help acquire this farm. Please, fingers crossed for me, and tell all your friends in Boxford and North Andover to go vote, especially Boxford. We need you. This land is amazing. It's 34 acres, but it preserves incredibly important farmland soils. The rear of the property is all rare species habitat and it has wetlands that feed right into Lake Cochichewick, say that 5 times fast, which is North Andover's primary drinking water supply. So this land preserves a lot more than what you see with the naked eye. It's also beautiful. This is what you're looking at from conservation land that's across the street. So imagine if that view was changed. So we have to raise $1.5 million from town meeting. We have received $1 million donation, incredibly generous toward this project, and we still have to raise $550,000 in order to be able to buy this farm. So more and more of our projects are like this, where we are having to compete with developers to buy our farmland at market value. And those farmers deserve that, but it does make my work more challenging. So I will leave you with that. If anyone wants to help us save Barker Farm, feel free to talk to me afterwards. That's a website for our farmland conservation program. I'll leave you with this slide that 2/3 of our farmland in Essex County remains unprotected, and we're doing the best we can to preserve it for the new generation of farmers. And with that, I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Do you have slides?
No.
Okay, do you want this or just this?
No, just the microphone is fine.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. All right, I'm sandwiched in between two very good speakers, so I'm a little nervous. I'm a farmer, not a public speaker. So my name's Stacey Apple. I co-own and operate Iron Ox Farm with my partner, Alex Ceccanelli. He's my partner in life and business. This is going to be our 10th season coming up. We started the farm in 2017. We currently are farming in Hamilton at the previous site of Green Meadows Farm, as Vanessa mentioned. But we have had to move our farm twice since we started farming, so obviously land access is a problem. But we plan on hopefully staying where we are because of Greenbelt. We're really lucky that we have our 99-year lease with them. As we've come up in farming in this area, a lot of our friends, many of them have left to farm in Vermont and Maine and New Hampshire because land is more affordable there. We were planning on doing the same, but somehow, luckily, the opportunity to lease this land came up, which was amazingly just everything fell into place. So we applied for it, we got selected, and we got to stay in the place where we grew up. Well, we're from Danvers, but pretty close to Hamilton. So we're in our community, still farming, which is really exciting for us, and we have an amazing community. So yeah, just some basic information about our farm. We're a certified organic vegetable farm. We grow about 8 acres of diversified vegetables, so about 40 different varieties, or different crops, many, hundreds of varieties. We do also grow flowers. We have pick your own blueberries, and we also have we grow grain on a micro scale. We grow about 1 acre of wheat and 1/4 of an acre of corn for cornmeal, which is a fun part of the farm, a little addition. And we're really proud that we are certified organic. It's something we've always had organic practices, but getting the certification was a big goal for us that we accomplished, and we're really proud of that. I think we're the only farm stand on the North Shore that is certified organic, so we like that we can offer that to people. It's something a little bit different and more niche than some of the other farm stands, so we can, make people want to come to the farm stand. We also have, our farm stand, we have a CSA with about 170 shareholders. That is 28 weeks long. It goes from the summer through the late fall. And we do a lot of wholesale to local businesses that sell food. So lots of local restaurants, bakeries, food hubs, food processors. We grow all of the cabbage for Pigeon Cove ferments, so we grow about 1/2 of an acre of cabbage every year. That makes amazing sauerkraut. So we really like to diversify our markets and be kind of all over the North Shore. You can find our veggies in so many different places. And yeah, we opened our farm stand last year. We've been open for almost a year, which was a really, really big dream that we had, and we finally accomplished it. One of the reasons that we really wanted to farm at the place that we're at now was that it can be open to the public. The farm that used to be there had a really beautiful farm stand, and the community was really disappointed when it closed. So to be able to bring that back to our community was really fulfilling. And it's been really nice to connect with people in our area more and more now that we can just have our doors open and anybody can come to the farm stand. So a shameless promotion for our farm stand here. It opens on May 2nd for the season. We'll be open 5 days a week, Wednesday through Sunday. So please come by and support, and we have a lot of really good food. Before I was farming, I worked in the restaurant business. I was a cook for 8 years, and this is such a fun thing for me to do, to be able to curate and select really special products to sell alongside of our produce for people to come and purchase and eat. And I get to talk to people now about recipes and food and what they're eating and what they're making with the veggies that we grow. So that is like such an exciting thing for me. And let's see, what am I missing here? I guess I can talk just like a little bit more about our connection with Greenbelt, which is kind of why we're here, I think, is the preservation of the farm is really important. We're so lucky, and we feel really lucky that we got this opportunity, because otherwise I don't think we would be farming here anymore. So thank you to Greenbelt and people like Vanessa, who work tirelessly to not only secure these really, really precious farmlands, but to connect with us like regularly and check in with us, make sure that things are working well at the farm, that we have the things we need. So yeah, it's really, really wonderful. We have a great community, thankful for that. And I think that's all I have to say. That's pretty much it. That's our farm. Come and visit us at the farm stand. And that's what, thanks. Turn it over to Andre.
I just wanted to suggest that we would like to see Andre's slide and sit on one of the pews, and then come back up here. So that's good. Pretty good to see the slide.
Yeah, I don't know.
Definitely, for sure. That sounds
Yeah.
great. Thanks.
I'm going to get my slides up here in a minute, but my name is Cantelmo. I'm one of the co-owners of Heron Pond Farm in Southampton, New Hampshire. We are a four-season farm that straddles Southampton, New Hampshire, and Amesbury, Massachusetts. Thanks. So I kind of want to bring together a couple of things that we were talking about today. One of them, I'm going to tell you a slow story of how conservation.
Somebody's car alarm.
Oh, is that car alarm? Okay, you know if I was doing it or not. I'm so magnetic. So there's a really wild conservation story that brings Heron Pond Farm into existence, because we're just two college buddies from Rutgers and New Jersey that got together in 1996, and we're like, gee, one day it'd be great if we had a farm together. And we lived together for a couple of years when we both were getting natural resource management degrees. And then wonderful things happened to us along the way. So I'll tell you that story, and then I'll quickly take you through just sexy farm photos of like how we do cool things with the money that you guys give us by buying our food. And we get to use, because of the easements and stuff, we get to farm in a different way. Like, we don't have to use a bunch of different chemicals and stuff to like make sure that we're getting things. We can hedge our bets a little bit because we can afford to farm this way, even though we are blessed with the customers who also can afford the produce that's grown this way. So I'll take you through that. This is our farm stand right here. Lance Heidi, I remember your church is who designed our logo right there. And this is our address. This address is what address means to a farmer, because this has to do with when the sun angle is going to change, and when we're going to have that many hours of daylight. And the magic one for a four-season farmer is 10 hours of daylight, and you'll get to see a little bit of that. This is Greg Bailog and myself. These are old pictures of us because apparently we don't ever stand next to each other very long. That's us receiving the Distinguished Alumni Awards down at Rutgers University for being able to pull off farming in New England, which is hysterical to me, actually. But I thought I would include that shot because it was there. The only other, I had a college shot of us graduating in our gowns, but that was a little bit fun. So here's Heron Pond Farm, and this is what it takes for us to farm in this part of the country. And this is basically, I'm show you the difference here, is this right here and this right here is all that Greg and I own. All the rest is stuff that's necessary to produce the acres, to produce the food that we are able to sell, to pay everybody, to pay our bills, to run the farm. And if it wasn't for all this other land, we wouldn't be able to produce that amount of food. I'm going to show you a couple different things, but basically, just to point out the context, because the other ones are going to zoom in, and you might lose track of where you are. This is the front of Heron. That's where the farm stand is. These are the blueberry patches. This is where Greenbelt's property. See all this woodland, and it cuts through this backfield right here. That's Greenbelt is preservation. Down here is another preservation society that wants this backwoods, and the landowner made them preserve these two fields too. And then these fields here, and I'll show you a little bit more close up. These fields are part of the Halferma Trust, which is the Van Bocklin Family Trust. And then all of this is Southeast Land Trust. So this business of trusts being important parts of farming is for real. These are the two organizations. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and I hope that people understand that I'm talking about two different contexts. They're both important. It may sound like I'm being a little bit down on SALT, Southeast Land Trust, but their purpose is different, and it's important to understand their purpose. Greenbelt is way more invested in the fact that farms need to be farming than Southeast Land Trust is. Southeast Land Trust is interested in open space. A lot of times that open space has to deal with basically people wanting open space next to their land, and it's much easier to get that. But what you have to understand about trusts is that Greenbelt makes it a little bit easier to farm on land that's preserved than Southeast Land Trust. So you guys are really blessed to have an organization like Greenbelt here. We're blessed to have SALT because if I didn't have it, the Van Bocklins would have never given the land trust to them, which basically locked up the development rights and then gave it or sold it to Greg and I. So basically, having a third party is important, and you just need to choose which third party you're dealing with. And we could talk about more of this in the question and answer. I don't want to dig myself a hole here. But just understand that there are very different organizations when you're talking about preserving something. So these properties are the SALT properties up here. And this is the Kenny Hill farm. And I need to talk about the Van Bocklins for a second because they own this whole piece, they own this piece, and they owned everything that is Heron Pond Farm too. And the way that they did it was there was a farmer, and he was old, and he didn't want to farm anymore. And so they bought him out for fair market value. And they locked the land price at that year. And they were just like, it's 1992, and this was bought in 1992. All these greenhouses, that's my house right there. In 1992, and I moved in 1999, and they said, you can have it for 1992 prices. And not only that, we're going to lease it to you for 10 years, and all you have to do is preserve ownership, pay the property tax, and all the maintenance fees, and in 10 years, you can buy us out. And so if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have Heron Pond Farm. They did the same thing on the other side of the street when Walter Savinsky wanted to retire. They gave him a life lease. He got to die in the house that he built. And if it wasn't for those people, it wouldn't have happened that way. And Greg rented a house until he could move into that house, and then he bought that side. So now we're 2 landowners that own Heron Pond Farm. We actually own the land that we're on, and it's only possible because of the Van Bocklin Family Trust. This is the Halferma Trust, which is owned by Van Bocklin Family Trust, and they held that in trust for the farm until we were negotiating to actually purchase this. But prior to purchasing it, it will be turned over to a third party, the development rights, because that will lock up the ability to develop all of that 90-acre parcel. So Southampton is blessed to have the Van Bocklins preserving so much of it, and we're blessed to have other organizations that can help out with that. And then just to zoom in again, oh, I went back, sorry. Doop. This is the really, I think, people who walk the lands. It's open for walking and everything, and people enjoy the fact that they kayak, they canoe, they land all in here. All of this woodland here is preserved by Greenbelt, and it cuts right across this field. So they don't own, but they preserved a nip of this field. But from this point to this point, all of this that's all Greenbelt. Right? Right, okay. All right, now silly farmer stuff. And just to give you guys an overview of how we do things, this is like deliciousness to me, is to see a cover crop that thick. And so every year we start with, like last year's cover crops and soil tests, and we can craft our formula of how we're going to farm that year and what we're going to put where based on this information. And everything I'm going to go through right now, which is, I'll go through it rather quickly. There'll be plenty of time during question and answer to talk farming nonsense, but it's all we all can farm this way because we have, the flexibility of great customers and being able to have that land preserved. So this is one of the things that we do. Another thing that we do is instead of using fumigants, biofumigants, which are very, very popular in strawberry production, if you like eating strawberries from the grocery store, one of the ways that they're produced very well is with biofumigants, or not biofumigants, fumigation. Biofumigants is what we're turning to. But we use steam instead of chemicals, and we're able to, get this kind of equipment through other sorts of grants and stuff. So this is another tool that's open to farmers. We lay these tubes down and cover it with tarps, and then we'll steam the soil, and that'll kill the fungus, and it will also kill all the weed seeds. And so then no herbicides, no fungicides. We plant in it, and it looks like this. And I didn't weed that. And these aren't actually weeds. These are Andre forgetting to clean the arugula out before he planted the kale. So those are actually arugula, which ended up being a fancier mix that you had to pay more for because it had arugula in it. But basically, you can see that the plants are super happy. There are no weeds. There are no yellow things there. And we just steamed it and didn't touch it again, and there are nothing added to that. We also use these 3-season tunnels. This is a hay grove system that we were able to put up, and a big reason. Again, the price per acre, like you were talking about, of this farmland is so expensive. And a price per acre of putting up a hay grove's about, well, this is back in 2007 when I put it up. It was $45,000 an acre. It's more like almost double that now. And we can afford to make these investments if our money is not so tied up in land acquisition and our mortgages are so high. So we were able to innovate, and one of the things that we did is we invested in this, which really helped us along with the other things that we innovate. We do, transplanted peas into tunnels like these using strange devices like this paper pot transplanter. And they're just like really low-cost methods to help move our season along a little bit quicker to you, and we can care for the soil in that way. And like I said, you don't know this, but we steamed all this before I laid that all out, and that was the last time I had to touch it. We did trellis these peas, and they grew beautifully. We also get to, because we can build these tunnels over things, we can use field equipment to put all of this stuff down, so it's a lot quicker and more economical for us. And then we can pass those savings on to you. And then we have the tunnels that just go right over that, and so it makes it just makes them like modular systems for us. And this is one of those modular systems growing tomatoes. And does anybody buy anything from Tender Crop? Do you guys buy tomatoes from Tender Crop? So you're buying my tomatoes, so you're welcome. So yeah, we probably grow 80% of the tomato crop that you see at Tender Crop, and especially the heirlooms. A lot of times the red ones we don't grow, but all the heirlooms ones that you see there are stuff that we grow for Matt. And that pallet is going to Tender Crop right now, and so we bring a lot of tomatoes out. This marketed through our CSA, our farm stand, and through other farm stands in the area. And we really do market like two crops, and I'll bring you through the other crop, but we do tomatoes and carrots is like who gets all that stuff. Do you buy carrots at Tender Crop? You're welcome. Okay, so we also have these like winter farmers markets, which in reality, I have to say, is a smaller proportion of our sales right now. I wish you well with your stand. The stand is the way to go. We don't do anything better than you guys coming to us, and for many, many reasons. But yeah, the farm stand is the way to go. We have a great CSA following there. It's more interaction with the community, and you get to tell your story in a more exclusive way. I find winter markets or some even the summer markets, like Max here does the Newburyport Market. We go to Newburyport Market. It's about telling people about your space and stuff like that. But it's fun, and it's, for me, it's gossip with other farmers. That's why I go to. Do you go to farmers market for that? You don't even go anymore, do you? You don't go anymore. See, there you go. That's right. And so, us farmers, we like to go to market because we like to talk to other farmers, and that's the only, because we're all alone, just doing our thing. So anyway, so then we get to use some pretty cool equipment. This is a rock rake. I farm they call it the Granite State for a reason. I don't think that changes when you cross over the line too much, but we have rocks. I mean, a lot of rocks. So we have the rock rake, and then we have this rock picker. I have a much more sophisticated one now, but I didn't have pictures of it, so you guys get to see this one. And so this is how we lay out our fields. We lay them out with these seed beds. We try to get them relatively rock-free, and there's gonna be a point to this. These mega nets are really great because it came out of a conversation on our walk with Greenbelt, was about water conservation when we did because we pull a lot of water out of Lake Gardner. So now over over 50%, I don't know how much more over 50%, but over 50% of our irrigation is done with these mega nets, and 50% of these mega nets are actually ultra low flow, meaning they are 0.9 gallons per minute, which is really a nice even rain onto the surface, and it helps contribute to water conservation in the area and stops runoff, stops a lot of things, but it really helps with the water conservation. And I think that's been super important and part of a partnership that has come out of the unwittingly come out of land preservation. And then built this giant flame weeder. This is for, we make our beds ahead of time, and then we let the weeds germinate, and then we flame them. And again, this is about reducing the amount of herbicides that are used on your food. And this, you can't see the contrast that great, but these are alive weeds. And these actually are green, but they're dead. They're going to be cooked, and like tomorrow when I come back, there will be nothing there, even though they're all glossy like that. And that's what the flame weeder does. And because we get these to grow like that, we're going to get about 3 weeks of not having to weed anything. And so that gives the little seedlings time to get high enough for me to use cultivation instead of herbicides. And that's the goal, is to get through that little period where I don't, because if I have to go out and hand weed, no one can afford this produce, you know? So that's the thing. So those bands that you saw in the thing, we grow them up into these big bands of carrots, these big carrot fields. We're up to about 6 acres of carrot production at Heron Pond Farm right now, which is nothing compared to carrot production in the world, but for carrot production in Essex County and Rockingham County, it's something. And so this is a steerable frame. Those are my kneecaps. But this is a steerable frame. I'll show you how it works. I think I'm going to show you how it works. Am I? Yep, there it goes. So this is weeding without weeding. So we don't hand weed because that's way too expensive. And herbicides would be easier, but then not exactly a practice that we can maintain and continue to grow and grow good soils and have the soils preserved. So that's how that little mechanism works. And then we grow tons of food for storage for the winter, and we stack it in these boxes. We stack those boxes 3 high. We pack them into, we have 3 different cooling facilities and 1 warming facility, because it's where sweet potatoes have to be 50 degrees for the winter. So if you're getting a sweet potato from us, it wasn't kept in the cold. It was actually been heated to stay that temperature. And we do this so that we can continue to have, our stand open all 4 seasons. And we have a crew that basically, they laugh that what they do is they get up in the morning and they wash carrots. But it's employment. And so we keep 4 full-time local people in the wash house all winter long. And they're available to do the other jobs that we need on the farm, like we graft over 10,000 tomato plants to have that tomato production. If we didn't have a 4-season farm, we wouldn't have the people that we could graft 10,000 tomato plants to do. And the tomato grafting is another thing that keeps us from having to do things with disease, because the rootstock is so much more resilient against disease than the stuff that goes on top. And then we have, I know that you guys all know that our farm stands are all opening up in May. Well, our farm stand is open all year round, but really gets going in May and puts out all these plants for sale. But all those plants were seeded in December and January. And so someone had to seed them and tend them and water them. And having a year-round crew for that stuff is good. And then we have a year-round sales crew that stays employed as well. So we have 3 people in the farm stand, a full-time CSA operator, and 2 part-time CSA distributors to help us with we do a winter CSA and a summer CSA. And so, this is the Heron Pond Farm family that that was around. Paydog is much older now. He's, yeah, that's my number. You can call me. That's my email. You can get there, and it's heronpondfarm.com. We're over in Southampton, and yeah, come visit us. That's it.
Yeah, come on up, guys.
I sat here while you guys were.
Yeah, I know. They wanted to watch you.
I wanted to be jealous of all your toys.
I didn't show all the toys.
So you guys will have to hand that mic back and forth between you. And I think Annie is going to have a mic available for questions from the audience. And I'm just going to try and keep this from going totally off the rails. Yeah, that mic there. So thank you very much. Very interesting presentations, but I'm sure also, fodder for questions. I have a bunch of questions here that I can ask, but I think it would be most fair to open it up to the audience. And Annie is going to have. Let's see. I think we just push this and hold it for a moment. Test 1, 2.
Okay, I'll run.
So let's have some hands. All right. Annie will just run around and get to you.
Thank you. What are your plans for having any animals on the farm? Chickens or any other thing?
We don't have livestock on our farm. No, we don't. We were subleasing some of our land to a sheep farm, but they really downsized their farm. Me and my partner and I, we have no background in working with livestock, so it is a huge undertaking of a thing we've never done before, which is just unlike us. We like to do things we feel confident and good about. And we also don't live on our farm. It's really hard to take care of animals when you don't live on your farm. Yeah.
I have zero desire to have an animal on my farm for a multitude of reasons. One, we do value-added products on our farm, and as soon as you have that, you need a hazardous, you need an alternative plan, because as soon as you have livestock, you need other plans involved. We are also this is going to get complicated, but there's a law called FSMA, and it's a Food Safety Modernization Act, and we meet the threshold to have to. Do you meet the threshold? Okay. I meet the threshold to have to apply to all of it. So after you gross over $500,000 a year, you have to comply with every box of FSMA. I'm not going to bore you with those boxes, but a lot of them have to do with transference, and they have to do with water, and they have to do with things that would make having animals and vegetables exist in the same space, especially vegetables that were meant to be eaten raw, way more difficult and expensive to pull off. And so that's the shortest way I can say I'm copping out of that.
Next question.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. If in a magical world you could double the amount of land you have under in farming, would you make more money, less money, or the same money? Or would you rather have another farm family come and take over that extra land?
I would make less money because I would go into a deeper rotation of cover crops, and I would build the luscious, deepest, beautiful soil, and then I'd roll around naked in it. And I would pay good money to be able to do that. So yeah, and then I would just be able to plant back into that. I mean, if you knew the gymnastics that we go through with spreadsheets for plant backs, crops that follow crops, families that follow families, and when we can go fallow. My land is lucky to get. Our goal when we started farming was 1 out of every 3 years, an acre would have cover crop and be fallow. Then it went to 5, and now we're at 7. So, and that's because we lose the land. Like those little spots you saw, I used to have more. But it's gone because they're houses. So if I had double, it would just be that first slide, not the first slide that I was paying attention to was the beautiful oats that you saw with the little soil testing. It would look a lot like that for a lot longer during the year. That's all I would do with it. What would you do with it?
I would say it's hard to say, because when you scale up at a certain point, you do start to just make the same amount of money. Because we've scaled our business up over the years. We went from 1 up to 8 acres, so it's been interesting to see. It's not just like a continuous going upwards. However, I think that our farm is at kind of a weird in-between scale. It's a bit challenging. We're not small enough to be hand scale, but we're not large enough to mechanize everything. So I do think if we doubled and we were at 20 acres, we could invest in more mechanization and potentially could make more money.
That is the hardest part. That is when we were that size, that's a super hard size. We call it like mid-small. Some mechanization can be done, at your level, but like those big cultivating racks, and now I don't even have that steerable frame anymore. Like I have a tractor that does that job, specifically. The tractor to replace the extra person was $50,000. So when you're doing 8 acres, it's very difficult to justify a $50,000 purchase. When you're doing 30, 40 acres of vegetables, you can. But what we do somewhat in this thing, and Essex has one, is that, like that steamer that I showed you, we do as like a group farm purchases, or what we have is a soil conservation district will buy a piece of equipment. So we have like the no-till drill that put in that cover crop, I don't own. It's owned by the conservation district. Now I happen to own the steamer because I sell them, and so I could afford one because, but also two soil conservation districts in New Hampshire and 2 in Massachusetts own steamers, and they lend them out to farmers. So that's how you can kind of bridge some of the stuff that we're talking about.
Okay, yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm State Senator Bruce Tarr, and I apologize I have to leave, but I'm going to go really, really quickly. Number one, I want to say thank you to the church for bringing us together and reminding us that farming is an essential part of Earth stewardship on Earth Day. Number two, I want to say thanks to the farmers for coming to share in a conversation and helping us to understand what the challenges are. It's also good to see my friend John Elwell here, another farmer of great repute in our area. And I also want to say thank you to Greenbelt for the proactive position they have taken in ensuring that land can be available for active farming. That's critically important. And the last part I just wanted to mention is that on April 1st, we all know it is April Fool's Day, but in the Massachusetts Senate it wasn't, because we passed a comprehensive agriculture bill to help sustain agriculture in Massachusetts by doing things like codifying the infrastructure grants, the food security infrastructure grants that help farmers be able to afford things like refrigeration and greenhouses and things like that. And we also codified the Healthy Incentives Program, which helps folks that might not be able to otherwise afford healthy produce to be able to afford it, and emphasizes purchasing it locally. So this is a great conversation. I really appreciate everyone doing it. If you want to learn more about the agriculture bill, reach out to us. We'd be happy to tell you. But this is a great conversation, and I'm glad it's being had here, and I hope that it's going to be had in lots of other places in Massachusetts as the days go by. So thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Thank you. Got another question here.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I was really intrigued by the pictures of the steamer and the flamer. I had no idea that those kinds of methods were being used in farming, or that they worked. And my question is, why are they not used at bigger scales? Is it, because obviously there's a lot of pesticide and herbicide use going on in our country. Is it that they're cost prohibitive to be used at larger scales? I'm just wondering why they're not being used, because it sounds healthier, you know, for the food that actually gets produced, and for all of us to not have to use the herbicides and the pesticides.
And I wanted to actually add a question to that, to the same thing, and that is, how does that not damage some maybe beneficial microbes or things like that in the soil?
All right, so your question, I don't want to bypass you, is a huge answer that maybe we could do at the reception.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because basically it does and it doesn't is the answer.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's a longer thing, and there's been major studies on this stuff, and it gets pretty deep, and like it has footnotes and stuff. So those are not the kind of questions to do here. But like, yeah, so the reason that these aren't done on larger scale, some of them are. Flamers have been used for years. Flaming is something that flamer with the shields and stuff that I came up with is based off of stuff that's a little bit more open. I needed it to do the reason I have a shield on there is because crabgrass is very hard to kill with flame, and the unshielded wasn't doing it for me. But there's also some dangers to it too. I mean, like I think we both have horror stories of flamers. I mean, I think Josh is a farmer behind you. I think he has a flaming horror story. I have several. One endangering myself, one endangering burning down like a woods next to, I mean, a spark is a big deal. And so like, why not done on a larger scale? Because it can get out of hand. But there's like the potato farmers, like a lot of potato farmers up in Maine, organic potato farmers, use these flamers, and as long as you travel at 4 miles an hour and you think that that's slow, but I'm going to tell you that's scary as all hell. If you travel at that speed with a flamer, you can kill all your Colorado potato beetles and they fall right off and you don't damage the plants. But that's scary. I mean, and so if you can do a spray, and so it's also cost effective. So like herbicides work better and are cheaper than that flaming that you saw. Like herbicides work. Herbicides also have plant back restrictions like I was talking about with my cover crop thing. You literally can't plant some things behind them because they won't grow, because they work. So herbicides are dangerous in that way. So it's an exchange. And that's the thing with the flamer. The steam is being adapted. UC Davis, there's a gentleman whose name is escaping me, but I'll remember by the reception. He's building bigger and bigger units to replace biofumigation in strawberry production, predominantly within the Salinas Valley in California. And so all of his work is super important. But the machine that the company that I work for, Sue, that you saw there, that they built for him as a prototype was $1 million. Because it had to incorporate a tiller and a steamer, and the tiller tills up the soil, and the soil passes through the tiller and gets steamed and laid back down, and then it has a better, because at a big production level, now I'm not going to buy $1 million machine, but someone might. And like at scale, maybe that'll come down. And so there are different reasons why some of these things are not used at different levels. I don't know if did I answer your question a little bit? Okay.
Okay, we have a question down here, Annie.
I love hearing all this. So, Andre, I have a question for you. How many acres do you grow in a season?
Grow, till, including cover crop,
Sure.
not including cover crop. That's just vegetable production? Or?
How about just production?
Vegetable production is a solid 30. It's probably more like 40, but it's solidly 30.
I thought it was great hearing you say that there are organizations that own some of this equipment we're talking about and lend it out, but having seen Stacey working the farm, it's so hard. What's the climate like now for getting grants and so on with this crazy situation we have?
Oh. Well, without talking about that, on a positive note, there's a grant that closes on Wednesday. It's the Value Added Production Grant. A lot of people from small farms are applying. We're applying because in Europe, we were just talking about equipment, I think privately. I don't know about like European equipment is for smaller farms. And so like there's all these big carrot lines out in California that make baby carrots, and they're made out of seconds. So out of 6 acres of carrots, I will produce 36,000 pounds of seconds carrots, which will be compost or donated or whatever. But I just applied for a value-added grant for the equipment that is only available from importing it from Europe because it's tiny. That is a barrel grinder that makes baby carrots out of seconds. And so the climate is that like there's still stuff out there. There's innovation grants. Mass is very much better than New Hampshire. Mass has MDAR, and you should talk about this. Mass is better than New Hampshire, so I'm going to hand it.
No, I'm sorry for the New Hampshire farmers. It's rough in the grant landscape. Yeah, I think because we're in the state of Massachusetts, we have a really strong agricultural program that supports farmers. So we're really lucky if you're in Massachusetts. They've picked up a lot of the slack. And their MDAR, the Mass Department of Agriculture, has increased their like outreach to farmers to like educate them about applying for grants. So it's really wonderful. We have gotten a lot of equipment and infrastructure with grants through MDAR. I wouldn't apply for any sort of federal grant. I know farmers who applied for the REAP grant, which is like a energy grant through the federal government, through the USDA, and the money was retracted from them. But if you're applying for grants through MDAR, it's a good bet that it'll go through. They're highly competitive though. So I think that's the hardest part is there's a lot of farmers applying for these grants. And so your grant writing game needs to be pretty strong.
Also in Mass, I can't remember Mike's last name, but they do they help you with feasibility studies on your farm. There's a lot of support here in the state of Massachusetts that we kind of don't have unless you really get a hold of a really great extension agent in New Hampshire. Mass has a little bit better of a team to help you.
Great. Where's the microphone at this point? Right there. You can give it to your husband if that's all right. We'll let.
I wanted to thank you guys very much for this. It's fascinating. One of the things that we've all been watching in the news is that the recent unpleasantness in the Strait of Hormuz has made not only oil prices go up, but also there's a lot of information about fertilizer becoming much, much more expensive. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about, is that affecting you guys, and maybe more generally, if you could talk about your soil enhancement philosophy. How do you think about this?
I'm going to briefly answer this, but Andre has like a good answer because he was talking about it before. Luckily, our farm, we're on a small enough scale that it doesn't massively affect us. Yes, the price of fertilizer is going up for us this year, and fuel, the price of everything goes up every single year. That's just like what is happening. So yes, we do feel that, but it does motivate us. This has always been one of our goals, and it's stuff like this that continues to motivate us to be more resilient by growing fertility rather than buying it in. So cover cropping more, cover cropping fields for longer periods of time. One of the reasons why we really wanted to farm at the Greenbelt site is that it was a little bit bigger than what we were planning on farming, so we could do longer crop rotations. That's why we grow grain. We do 2 acres that will be in cover crop for 2 full years before we grow a cash crop every single year. So just like it's a further motivation to farm with better practices and grow fertility on the farm because you don't have to buy it. I mean, it costs you money because you're not making money, but it's nice to not rely on those outside sources as much. But
I don't. There are some good numbers on what you're saying. It's like sometimes when you're growing the fertility, you actually aren't losing the money. it's a complicated story. I think that there's been some really great talks at like the New England Vegetable Berry Growers Association on the resourcing and nutrient release of cover crops over time, and like what you're actually, the value. So the cool thing is that we're being educated as farmers is what's the value of that, right? And so then as soon as we can put a value on that, then there's an understanding of why you would want to do that practice. So that's the upside. So there's a couple downsides in what you're saying about fertility. So because like oil is a global market, so that 20% of the oil comes out of that strait, it affects global energy prices because demand. It's just supply and demand, and if you can sell it at that price, then the global price goes up. So the manufacture of nitrogen is energy dependent, so it's directly tied. So nitrogen costs are directly tied to fuel costs. So as fuel cost goes up, so does nitrogen. And it doesn't matter the source of that nitrogen, because if it's an organic source, like coming out, I get most of mine out of composted chicken manure. It doesn't matter that it wasn't manufactured by ammonification with fuel. It is nitrogen, and therefore, as nitrogen prices go up, that fertility price goes up. Okay, so that is happening. What also is bad is that while that's happening and trucking prices have doubled to transport the nitrogen, potash, which is a raw material that is an organic form of potassium that can be spread on fields, and then also rock phosphate, a little bit less with rock phosphate, but potash is out of Canada, and so it's tariffed. And so not only do you pay the added fuel costs for the rising price, so up until this year, we didn't pay a tariff on potash, but now we do. And so, so that's all the good news I have for you there.
Yes, another hand up over here.
I have a question for Vanessa, and maybe you guys can also chime in. You know, it seems like the Greenbelt has really thought about sort of the tension between farming and sort of nature conservation, and you're mixing that in. But can you talk a little about that? Because you don't necessarily see that across the country. There's sometimes more strife, if you will.
I think it's easier for those of us who aren't farmers and don't understand farming to see farming as being in conflict with nature. But the more that I hear from farmers, especially farmers at the scale that you see in New England, the small scale farming, that farming is not nearly as detrimental, and a lot of it is not detrimental at all compared to the massive monocultures of land that you have in the middle of the country or out west. I mentioned that most of New England farms are these patchworks of landscapes where you have working forests that are in tandem with the working farms. So those forests are still performing all the ecosystem functions that they were functioning before. Farm soils, no matter how they're being farmed, are not paved, and they're not being covered in massive quantities of fertilizer and pesticides like lawns are. Farmers can't afford to over-fertilize. They can't afford to use more pesticides and herbicides than they need. So they are working with specialists, integrated pest management specialists if they're not organic. All the farmers I'm aware of are working with integrated pest management specialists at a minimum if they're conventional farmers, because they don't want to be using more than they need to. Whereas every single lawn you see, I don't know how many lawns I see with little signs in them saying, don't let your dog walk here because I've just sprayed my lawn with pesticides. Everyone who's having their yards sprayed for mosquito and tick control, there is no regulation on that at all. That is aerosolized pesticides that you are breathing in, that your children are breathing in, and that are killing way more than just ticks on your lawn. So that is way more harmful to the environment than any kind of farming I've heard of, especially farming on the local scale like we have.
Other questions? Yeah. We'll wait for the microphone.
Here at this church, we had a screening of the documentary Common Ground last month, and Gabe Brown, the farmer in North Dakota, who is the author of the highly regarded book called Dirt to Soil. It was also the subject of another documentary called Kiss the Ground. So he's become kind of a role model of organic, regenerative farming that combines livestock with crop rotation and many different species of plants growing on the same acreage. But that ideal that he represents is really difficult for small farms to approach, even if they wanted to. Can you say a little bit about the disconnect, why it is so hard for the small farms to aim to be like what the Gabe Brown model of organic regenerative farming is? Why? What happens? Why can't more farms do that?
I think this is a good moment to address something that I am trying to bring more awareness around, is that regenerative is greenwashing. It's like the new greenwashing word, like natural, right? So there's no certification, nothing to hold people accountable who are claiming to be regenerative farmers. What does it mean? Does anybody actually know the definition? Probably not, right? So I think it's a term that actually comes from indigenous farming that's been completely misappropriated by like white homogenized culture. So I try to really be careful about using that word now. I think we just really need to like be thoughtful and understand what it means. And like, I think in that movie, Kiss the Ground, there's not a single indigenous person in it, and it's about indigenous farming practices, which is like kind of crazy. So I don't know if that's okay to bring that up, but it's just an important thing, I think, for everybody to know. And a lot of farms that claim to be regenerative or use no-till are actually just using herbicides instead of like using a tractor. So you really have to know a farmer and talk to them to really understand what their farming practices are. Because people can say things and we don't know what they're actually doing. I think that that's really important, especially in Hollywood or just kind of like celebrity status farmers. I think there's some misinformation and over glamorizing of what they do. And I think it just comes down to like access to land. Like land is really expensive, like not only here, but in the Midwest, land is really expensive. And so I don't know how a farmer could, it's hard to be farming in like the most holy way and have a profitable business. There has to be a place where your farm is profitable, especially if you don't come from generational wealth, if you don't come from a multi-generational farm with an infrastructure that's just like there for you. So I think, yeah, it's just a very singular experience for that person and probably not common for most farmers. The cost of everything is going up. We haven't changed the price of a bunch of kale in 10 years. It's been $3 a bunch when we started at the farmer's market 10 years ago, and it's still $3 a bunch. So like, and I don't want to make food more expensive. People should be able to afford healthy, good food. But there's a burden on farmers to keep food really cheap while everything else that they have to pay for gets more expensive. Fertilizer, labor, all these things. So that's a really long answer, but things I feel passionate about.
Okay.
No, don't. I thought I was going to be controversial on my answer, but I was just going to, just to dovetail off what you were saying is basically sustainability includes economic sustainability to me. And so these documentaries are two-edged swords for the small farming community. One, they help us keep our beautiful romantic image of who I am. Like you see Joel Salatin, right? You see some of these people doing these things, and then you hear I'm a farmer, and then some of your good feelings about those persons are transferred to me, and you feel good about what I do, and then you want to purchase my food. And I love that part. But then there's the other part that tells me when I watch the documentary, and I'm like, that is crazy, or that is wrong, or that is completely a misrepresentation of how it actually is. That's how I see these documentaries sometimes. Some of the stuff is really great. But then Joel Salatin, Salt of the Earth, beautiful Christian man, is rich. I mean, he's farming with such wealth that is beyond belief. JM, who is like the guru to so many young farmers, and then they find out that like someone gave him $500,000 to just start his like little 1-acre worm farm, which is beautiful. He's got this closed system and the worms do all the work and everything's great. But like, I don't have $1 million to start a worm farm. So like, I have a different story. I have a different story than you. I have a different story than Mac and Josh. I have a different story than all these people, and I farm the way that the land that I was given kind of lends itself to needing to be farmed. That's a whole story. Like, I farm some hillsides. I have to till a certain direction. We have to put greenways in between as breaks so that we don't have erosion. I got lucky. So here's something that makes me sound sexy. I had to put these permanent greenways, these breaks. Like, I plow my fields, but then I have like these drive rows that are permanent. And then someone from the Xerces Society, does anybody know what that means? The pollinator guys? They're like, you know what you could do there? You could plant all of these pollinating things there. And I'm like, yeah, great, let's do that. So then I have these strips of all these pollinators, and I look like I know. They, to me, are breaks so I don't lose all the soil that I've been working so hard to have. And yes, I get all these pollinators and stuff, but this is a story like someone thought it would be really important for me to have pollinators, and they were willing to come and help me do that. I wasn't like motivated to have these pollinators until somebody came to me about it. And so, like, yeah, it's part of our story now. We have like a pollinator plan, Heron Pond Farm pollinator plan. You can download it off our website. But I didn't write it. The Xerces Society wrote it for me, and they helped me implement most of it, you know? So these are ways that, like, Heron Pond Farm is supposedly sustainable or something, you know? We are not certified organic, and we tell people that. And it has hurt us and customers sometimes because people only want to buy certified organic. That's great. Then you should do that. We farm in a way that we believe works with the farm that we have for economic sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. I'll put my soil chemistry knowledge up against the best of them. And Greg is smarter than me. So basically, like, I think we have two smart people that care about the ecology of the soil, trying to produce good things. Sometimes that incorporates mixed methods, but sometimes these promotions for what we do, I think, burn us as well as help us. I know that doesn't exactly the answer that people want to hear, but I think that that's the truth of the matter.
I think the truth is really helpful. Thank you. Yeah. It's sometimes in short supply these days. Are there other folks who have questions? We've got one over here, Annie. And while you're getting there, I just wanted to ask you guys in terms of young people going into farming. Obviously, Greenbelt is trying to find land that can be available to young farmers. What's your sense of the population of folks who are interested in farming around here? Are you going to have more land than you can dispose of? Do you know of people who are interested in farming? Where does it seem to be headed?
I can start with that. Greenbelt had an event in early March. It was kind of a lightning round of agricultural people in the farm support world giving various presentations on how they can support farmers. We had something like 85 people attending that, and the majority of people attending were young farmers who are looking for land or trying to farm in Essex County. So there are a lot out there. We also have a great nonprofit organization called New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, which is based at a marine farm in Beverly right now. They are training people to farm organically, and they are churning out farmers all the time. And a lot of them are from this part of the world, and they want to stay here and they want to farm here. So there is a big supply of people who would love to be able to afford to farm here.
Great. If any other comments from you guys, or okay, then we'll go right here.
I wanted to talk or ask some questions about composting. If you get it from an outside source, do you test it for heavy metals? To amplify that, my house is quite old. It's built in 1870. I compost all the leaves that I gather each fall, but I don't dare use it on my raised beds. The house has been painted with lead innumerable times, so do you test for heavy metals? Is the basic question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Now that we're certified organic, we don't have a good source of compost that we can use, so we don't buy and compost anymore. But we were buying it from Black Earth Compost, and they do test for heavy metals. Their compost is very safe, very high quality. They're a wonderful organization, or not organization, business, and you can buy their compost at like most garden centers. Do you sell Black Earth? Yep. Get your Black Earth compost at Heron Pond Farm stand this spring for all your gardening needs. Yeah, they're really good. They test for PFAS, heavy metals. They do everything there. They're really, really wonderful. We want to start doing our own composting on our farm. It's just a goal we have. And we also do test for heavy metals in our soil tests annually, and everything is below the threshold.
It's a shame that you aren't using your leaves. Leaves are amazing. Deciduous leaves make amazing compost, like some of the highest quality compost that there is. We make all of our own compost for spreading on our fields. Most of it is not animal-based. Some of it we have from the spoils of the horse barns. But most of it is basically, it's spent hay. It's pulling off cover crop in a different way, and depending on the crop that we have to have in there, and then we compost that. So we use a farmer's baling equipment to get that off, and then we basically windrow it with other vegetables and stuff and stir it. So we don't test much. Sometimes when Black Earth has too much compost and they need to offload some, I get a discount on that, and I would buy it from them. But as is said, it's very well tested compost. And then the other thing that's really well tested is that we get there are big wood-fired electric plants in New Hampshire. Do you have them in Massachusetts? Wood-fired electric? There's one right out of Portsmouth. Actually, it's certified organic ash that comes out of the Portsmouth site, which is kind of unique. But it's well-tested ash, and it's a great liming agent as well as but I wouldn't call it compost. I would call it a soil amendment. But that is a worry that we had about heavy metals in that area. But it's tested pretty thoroughly.
So I think we're probably pretty close to wrapping up here. Wouldn't you say any? Unless, is there anybody else who has a question? Yeah, sure.
So this is a question that pulls you out of your farms a little bit more to the policy side. About 10 years ago, UNH did a study about if New England wanted to produce as much food as possible. I think they said at best, with responsible land use policy with forests and various other things, we could do about 50% of our food demand through farms in New England. The question is, would it be beneficial to you as small farmers if there was a specific policy to try to get to 50% local food production?
Okay, so it's a huge question, and my instinct with huge questions is the first thing that happens in my mind is like, that is like a fractal. Like, what seemingly might be a great policy might end up being a really bad policy. First of all, 50% seems really high to me because I like avocados and coffee and olive oil, and I'm thinking 50% of what? 50% of what could be grown here, or 50% of everything that like we ingest? Because like bananas are amazing, but like we're not going to grow those. So if it's 50% of the lettuce that we eat, that I can see, yeah. So, and then also 4 seasons, like a policy that would be that way, would it start to burn more fuel to have more tomatoes in the winter and cucumbers in the winter, like they do at backyard farms, which they produce hydroponically because you can't do it soil-borne in the middle of the winter. So I don't want to grow hydroponically, and so I wouldn't put up a hydroponic facility for that. So it's just so complex what the answer to that might end up being. So in my view, like, I'm a 4-season farm, and we don't grow tomatoes in the middle of the winter. We grow cold hardy greens in the greenhouse, and we have a root cellar that we mine, essentially. So if you're saying, are we going to change the eating habits and go backwards, and then this time of year right now, we would be in the middle of what's called the 6-week want. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that. I'm not, but I've heard the stories of, so basically, like the last apple has been eaten out of storage at this point, and the carrots and potatoes are getting fuzzy, and you're scraping some stuff. I mean, are we going back to eat that way to get there? Or are you saying you want to eat the way you eat now, and you want us to produce that? So, like, it starts to become a really complex question in my mind. Like, how do we achieve that? And are we achieve it by just basically burning more energy to do it? Or are you just saying more acres would be in crop production and we would have that stuff? And then are we going to start doing our own grains in New England? That doesn't seem to like fly. Yeah. No. I mean, so I guess it becomes a complex question. But if it means more people eating more local, I think what I would say more importantly is, and this is an indigenous term, so forgive me for stealing it, but food sovereignty, like, so are we sovereign in our food? And how could we be more sovereign? That would be a neat equation to start going towards than like saying 50% or something. Like, how can we be more autonomous little agents of our own food supply would be a unique question to be answered, and it would be fun, like, to problem solve that, I think.
That was a really good answer. I would say maybe if this is a policy that should exist, they should have farmers as a part of the policy making. Because I think a big problem is a lot of people make decisions without the people who are doing the work. So include farmers on that.
So I want to use the power of the mic here for one last question that's related, and that is food insecurity is real, and how can small farmers kind of have a symbiotic relationship with the structures that are trying to address in some small way food insecurity? And if you had something you wanted to say before.
Josh, can you run up here? Because you can answer this question.
And Vanessa,
You don't want to?
I'm sorry, did you?
I don't want to embarrass you, but Josh does a lot of this.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sorry, I just pick him out of
That's
the
awesome.
audience when it happens.
I'm Josh from Meadowsmith Farm. Food security, it's something, I have a farm in Brentwood, New Hampshire, and you know, we've started some nonprofit organizations. I was one of the founders of Seco Seat Local that did the winter markets, and something I'm really passionate about is food insecurity and trying to help my farm link up with that. And I know Heron Pond does a lot of donation. Most farmers do some donation. I actually incorporate donation into my CSA program. So for every $2, I take $2 out of every week's share, and I match it for $4 in donation. And so, and it doesn't sound like much, but it adds up really quickly, and I end up donating more because it really means a lot to me. But so far this year to date, we've already donated about 5,000 pounds to local food banks. And so I think, and it's also one of the, I don't do it because it's a marketing thing, but it really helps people understand the community aspect of the farm, that local food is for everybody, and it's something that I really believe strongly in. And so that's how I've been able to do it. Back when Andre and I, during COVID, we had a moment, and we had a donation program with our old company, and you know, we donated $100,000 in food during COVID too. And so linking those two things, I think, is really kind of closing the circle. You know, local food is not just for the elite, but it's for everybody.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we should wrap that up there. There is going to be a reception downstairs, so if you're open to sticking around, you probably can ask some more detailed questions. And Annie, did you have any final
I
words?
just wanted to thank everybody for coming. We do have refreshments downstairs. I hope you'll join us. And thank you for being here, and thank all of you for being here. Really, it's been a fertile conversation.
Yeah. Ba-dum-bum. Thank you.
Sorry, I recruited. I just
Oh, no, absolutely. It was a great answer.